up next, we have a panel on data ethics. To moderate this session, I would really take the pleasure in introducing one of ICOM's real characters, Sheila Colclasure, who is the Global Chief Digital Responsibility Officer at IPG. But would you like to take the floor and introduce your session on data ethics?
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, everybody's getting back in their hot seats with their beautiful port. I want everybody to come. We have an amazing group of experts who are going to talk through the issues. And of course, we want everyone to join in. We are going to talk about data ethics because there is a three-way collision of smart data marketing needs, people's expectations of service and trust, and regulatory enforcement realities. What we are going to talk through is how do brands and brand makers and brand activators begin to navigate these challenges. I am thrilled to be moderating today our amazing group of experts. So please join us on the panel to follow. Are we in? Are we ready to begin?
Sure, Sheila. I'm ready.
All right. Well, maybe I could just introduce our amazing panel. I'll say your name and then ask for you to give a little background about yourselves. And let's start off with Sachiko, a close friend and colleague for many years, and the European Data Protection Officer and Privacy Officer of Acxiom, Dr. Sachiko Scheuing.
Hello. I'm really excited to actually talk at this occasion. And by the way, I'm also the co-chairperson of FEDMA.
Oh, wonderful. And I want to introduce our next expert is the Global Head of Privacy at Novartis International, Knut, also a very dear, longtime friend and colleague. And I'm so thrilled to have Knut with us. Say hello, Knut. Tell maybe just a bit
Thank you, Sheila, and excited to be here.
All right, and then I'm thrilled to introduce Olivia Hawkins with Acceleration. Olivia and I are new friends and colleagues, and I am thrilled to have her voice on the panel today as well. Olivia?
Hi, thanks very much for having me.
I'm so glad that you're here. So we're just going to dive in. What we've done is we've tried to put together the most critical questions to get everyone thinking about data ethics, or we also like to call it the ethical use of data. And there is a three-way collision of data. My framer for this panel is the reality that we are accelerating into a data economy, that brands have had to do a rapid pivot over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 months, an accelerated journey that it would have taken us about 5 years to complete. And we've had to do that in a few short months because in-person merchandising and brand promotion has really dwindled away with the situation we all find ourselves in globally. So we've had to really dial up the data, and we've had to get smarter, and we need to get smarter still. So in a world where people are connected, that's where the audience is. We are achieving data infinity and technology certainty, and that's all driven with advanced algorithms and accelerated computing. Think about that three-way collision of smart data marketing needs. People expect brands to know them and serve them well digitally, and then the regulatory realities with things like GDPR, the European derogations, the US CCPA, and now the CPRA, the new law in Singapore, or the draft, rather, the update coming in Japan, the India draft, the new Canada C11. So there's a lot of change. I think change is the theme, but we believe that you start with how you're going to use data ethically. And with that, I'd like to turn to Knut and ask Knut to talk to our group a little bit about how data ethics is different than compliance. Knut?
Thanks, Sheila. So the key differences that I would see is that if you look at compliance, is fundamentally about rules. I would say ethics is more about principles. So if compliance would ask, is this activity allowed? Ethics would ask, is this the right thing to do? And as we heard Francesco say, in the right way and necessarily obviously at scale. So compliance is fundamentally defensive. So it's a do's and don'ts, things you don't do. And ethics, I would argue, is more forward-looking. So it's looking more at the impact that you want to have on stakeholders at large, but in particular on your customers. So compliance is binary, black and white. Ethics is multifaceted. Compliance, you could say, is more about form. Ethics is more about substance. And compliance roots deeply into a principle or a theory of deterrence. So you have a rule, you have a breach, you have a sanction. Compliance helps you to avoid the sanction. So this is like a framework that works well for people who don't want to do the right things, right? You have to deter. Ethics is rooted more in the assumption that people inherently want to do good, and it's about acknowledging paradox and helping to navigate paradox, and then ultimately be able to do what's good. So this is how I see the differences between both. Compliance isn't necessary, unfortunately, in the where we operate today, because you also need to. Not only do we have to be accountable, we heard Francesco also talking about accountability, but you need to be able to demonstrate accountability. So you need to put processes in place, and that's what compliance is about. But it doesn't get you to like a competitive advantage. It's more a minimum.
Thank you. That's a great answer. If I could turn to you, Sachiko, I wonder if you might talk for a minute with the difference between compliance and data ethics. And we are talking about data ethics. Do regulators, that's one of our collision items, do regulators care about the ethical use of data, or do they just care about compliance?
Great question, Sheila, as always. And you know what? I think this is a very interesting topic, because long time ago, regulators weren't really interested in ethics. You're so right. But what happened was, I think with all these developments, particularly in the field of AI, and also there was this one big push in, was it 2018? I don't remember. When was Cambridge Analytica? I think it was like 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the time when it started being picked up majorly. I think the kickoff was made during the so-called ICD PPC. I think privacy folks among us would know it's an international conference of all the regulators, and the main topic was data ethics. Now, one step back, the reason why regulators initially didn't want to get into the topic of data ethics is because, just as Knut said very rightly, ethics is not law, it's not black and white, so you can't grasp it. But as we get into the ungraspable area of AI-driven analytics and so on, you really do need to venture into the space. So thanks for the question, Sheila.
Oh, wonderful. Olivia, if I could turn to you next, maybe you could talk a little bit about how has the enormous pressure on marketers to become data-driven in the face of new regulations changed leadership thinking and design values?
Oh, such a tricky question too. Well, I mean, certainly there's huge pressure at the moment to use data. There's a real feeling that it gives you the competitive edge, and that if you're not doing it, you're missing out. How the design values have changed, though, has been quite interesting, because I think up until a few years ago, the responsible kind of use of data was really centered on, first of all, using it, secondly, making sure that your data was secure. So, nobody wanted rather to be that company that was hacked and sort of lost all the kind of the credit card details of their customers. So executives were very much responsible for sort of security of data. And then I think as we began to see the new regulations such as GDPR, and now we have, the ones you mentioned, CCPA, POPI in South Africa, that executive responsibility around data kind of stretched to include compliance. So it wasn't just security, it was then compliance as well. And now, of course, as we are beginning to see consumer anxiety about data, and we're beginning to see media pressure around data use, that executive responsibility has stretched once again. And now there is responsibility for kind of ethical use of data, which is, as Knut explained, is above and beyond compliance. It's sort of around behaviors and values around our use of data, not just compliance with regulations. So I think responsible use of data and then the design of how we use data has changed enormously. It has become more onerous, I think, for executives and for data specialists than it was before. We can't just have fun with data now. We have to be responsible as well.
Very, very good answer and thoughtful. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn back to Knut if I could. Knut, could you comment? Does your C-suite care about how the brand uses data? Does your C-suite, are they thinking about how to govern data and how to ensure the use of data is good for the brand, good for people versus bad?
Thanks. I think we're not different from Nestle or any other company where the C-suites increasingly care about sustainable behavior, right? So it's so that a code of ethics, I think, is central to the agenda of most C-suites today, and a code of ethics without addressing data ethics, ethics in AI is, I would say, is incomplete these days. So yes, very much. It's an ongoing conversation, and it's not only relevant for the C-suite; it's also relevant for the board, right? And we are conscientious about the the necessary creative dialogue that has to happen between the various internal constituencies, right? Data scientists, it's their job to make sense of data. It's their job also to do things simply because they can, and then it's the role of others to enter into the conversation and ask questions around, well, is this really what we want to do? How would a patient feel understanding that we are using data in this way? How would the consumer feel? So yes, it's at all levels of the organization, and it's good. It's good. I think we are entering into the right discussions away from really compliance-driven discussion dominated by data protection laws towards a more strategic, holistic view of the impact of what we're doing with data.
Thank you so much. Quickly, with our time, I'm going to turn to Sachiko and ask you this and give us your thoughts. One of the big accusations of marketing, and that's who we are, is that it manipulates people, a la Cambridge Analytica. How do we differentiate between manipulation and fairness?
So that is indeed difficult because you can actually see fair persuasion as being on a very far end of the spectrum of manipulation versus persuasion. Commercial persuasion has always been there already in the time of bartering deals, also a long time ago. But I would say if you confidently want to say that what I'm doing is not manipulation, but it's persuasion, I think you need to make it clear from the context where you are communicating to the consumer. It should be, by the way, also clearly communicated, written out somewhere or in some other way. The person who is being persuaded should know that they are actually being persuaded in a salesmanship manner. And also, you have to be transparent. There are many creative ways of being transparent, but unfortunately, the last time, particularly on the digital side, it's usually consent, right? I would say at the end of the day, though, the subtle differences are very difficult to actually formulate in like tick boxes. So the very last audit, if you want to, test that you can carry out is, how do you feel about it? I think that would be my answer.
That's great. I'm going to turn quickly to Olivia, and I want to ask you, Olivia, marketing and the evolution into digital first brand making has really taken a beating for over observation of people, for the manipulation of people, for profit before people, for a lack of accountability. All of this has really brought the trustworthiness of brand making into question. How could data ethics begin to reinstill, earn back trust in marketing?
Well, first of all, I'd sort of question if we have taken a beating. I think some of us have taken a little bit of a beating. I think, you know, the big social platforms have been called out. The role in Cambridge Analytica is a good example. I think people like Shoshana Zuboff have kind of questioned the role of Google and surveillance capitalism. So people are asking questions. I don't actually think we've had much of a beating yet. I'm a little bit fearful that that beating is still to come. And when I think about some of the kind of our clients who are not in the business of selling data, but who are using and collecting data, almost a sort of, you know, you have to pay with your data in order to get access to a supermarket site or to any sort of retailer's site, which is a little bit cheeky. So actually, I think the beating might be coming. I think people don't yet know enough to question really thoroughly what we're doing with data. And I think that we need to, just as Sachiko said, we need to be absolutely clear about what we're doing. We need to be really transparent on how we're using data and what data we're using. And I think we need to give people real control about whether they want that data to be used or whether they could stop us using that data. And I think that would be the way to avoid an awful lot of negative sentiment that I think could be coming our way.
That's really great. I'm going to do a quick round robin, and I'm going to go to Knut, and I'm going to say, give me your top points that you want to make about the value of data ethics for brands. Why should we all do a pivot away from compliance to data ethics? Your top, then Sachiko, then Olivia. Knut?
Because it's the right thing to do. And I love Olivia, the beating is still to come. So if you're in deterrence, avoid the beating, but it's the right thing to do.
Wonderful. Sachiko?
Yes, I think if you would ask a lawyer, they would say to have your liability under control. But I would say, actually, it's your reputation that is at stake. So that's why.
Thank you very much. Olivia?
And I would add to what Knut and Sachiko have just said, trust equals value. When your customers trust you, your business does better. So there's a real commercial imperative behind this, as well as doing the right thing and as well as protecting yourself.
Thank you so much. With that, I'll just ask William really quickly, how much time do we have left? And do we have any time to take questions from the audience? And do we have questions?
Sheila, you've got a little bit of time left. A counter will come up with 60 seconds to go. I'm just looking at your time. Yeah, I mean you've got plenty to go.
Oh, great. All right, then I've got a little more territory I want to cover for the group. If I could turn and ask a more granular question of Knut. I want to, there is maybe the beating is still to come, but the observational nature of all of our technology, which, as I mentioned at the outset, we are entering this period of data infinity, and the definition of data has changed from what for years we thought about data as personally identifiable data, name, address, email, etc. And now personal data under GDPR, personal information under CCPA, just to give two examples, is all data that relates or could be related to a person or a device or household. So, if we do take a beating, and that level of granularity, that level of personalization that we believe people expect and that smart data marketers are working on and practicing, let me ask you, I feel like marketing and advertising are in the crosshairs, but what would a world look like with only general marketing and advertising look like? Some regulators hold the position that marketing and advertising of 50 years ago is good enough. What if we stopped all one-to-one marketing?
I don't. So thanks for the question. So I'm not a marketer, right? So I can answer maybe from the perspective of a consumer first. So I think I would be deprived of value because I see value in some of the personalized marketing. So I don't know how this world would look like. I don't even know whether it's a world we should aspire to. I believe what regulators are calling out when they are when they look at how consumers are being targeted is they question some of the behaviors that lead to pushing personalized advertisement. So I think to reframe the question, so how should we think about sourcing our data? How should we think about tactics of targeting? So do we always need a profile, or is it is like proximity targeting, geofencing a better approach? How does this come down to a consumer? Are we considering creep factors in personalized advertisement as an ethical paradigm? So I'm not answering your question because I can't. I don't know how this world would look like. I don't think that we're ever going to go back into this world. But I think what's important in your but I think what's important in your question is that in fact there are regulators who believe we can, and we need to understand the concerns that they are voicing. And now I would go back to the concerns as I reframe them. But that's why I think why we're having panels like this, right? Well, we need to understand what we need to do differently in order to regain or maintain trust.
Thank you for that. Sachiko, I want to turn to you. We have an imperative as smart data marketers, and we're trying to be where people are. And some regulators have a different position, as we just talked through. Yet, there are certain countries in the world who are skating to where the puck is going, positioning their country for success and for the realities of a data economy in the digital age. Singapore comes to mind. Are there other countries looking to the future and positioning around the practical realities of data economy and digital in the digital era versus others countries that are looking in the rear view mirror and really steering away from those sort of practical realities? You're on mute.
Yeah, I was somehow on mute. No problem. Yeah, excellent point. Singapore is. I think Singaporeans are so smart. Now, this is the first thing I have to say, because what they do is they provide data protection, and they provide the possibility to innovate and improve the business. I was really inspired by the exceptions that they have in their new law that is called the business improvement exception. And that allows measurement, that allows people-based advertisement, and that allows the use of data for product enhancement and so on. And I think if you would look around the different laws that are currently in the cooking or the different debates that are taking place, Singapore is definitely on the forefront. I think this is what the Europeans want to do, because Europeans on the one side say things like, oh, we want to innovate with data. We want to actually be the digital territory of on this planet and things like that. But what are they doing? They're really having difficulties to hit the right balance. So no, Singapore is one of a kind. I love it. I think it's so reasonable.
That's great. If I could turn to Olivia, I would like for you to talk a little bit about, cover a couple of topics. Is there a disconnect between what people expect and what the regulations allow brands to do? And then in your brand experience, how are you guys using data to enhance your marketing initiatives? Where are you?
Okay, so on the disconnect, I think there is a disconnect at the moment. I'm not entirely sure that it's the disconnect you're perhaps implying. That sort of assumes I know what you're implying, though. Let me explain. When I look at something like GDPR, I see a huge amount of sort of resentment and irritation and frustration with the bureaucracy that it's created. And I think it's actually because people don't quite understand what it's protecting them from. And that's because they don't really understand the sophistication of how we can use data now. Now, that's obviously not everybody, but an awful lot of us would really struggle to explain just, how sophisticated personalization is now, or would perhaps be surprised at the fact that we actually can predict your vulnerability levels, and potentially we could use that in advertising campaigns. I mean, we don't, but it has kind of come up as a kind of a potential. And how many people are aware that gait analysis can now identify an individual? There's an awful lot of sophistication around data use that I just don't think people are aware of. So actually, I think quite a lot of the time, the disconnect is people getting irritated by kind of privacy regulations. I suspect that if people really understood what was possible with data, not necessarily what's happening, but what is possible with data, they might want tougher regulations. That, of course, is sort of my personal opinion. I do not represent the views of everybody on the entire planet, but that's kind of my kind of instinct. And are we using data? Well, Acceleration is a data specialist, part of the Wunderman Thompson network, which is a marketing specialist. So yeah, we are using data for personalization. We're using it for targeting. We're using it to optimize. All we try to do is to use data to create really great customer experiences. And that comes back to this kind of value exchange that Knut touched on. If you get rid of the use of data, what impact does that have? Will you have a less personalized, less kind of wonderful experience? Who knows? I think that Pandora's box is open.
Yeah, I think so too. Thank you for that. I think we have a couple minutes to go, and I'm going to introduce a last sort of topic, advanced algorithms and accelerated computing, AI, if you will, machine learning, AI, the very data science that we use to create audiences, evaluate audiences, determine how to connect and reach, and to measure our marketing efforts. So think AI, and AI everything. Yet this is an emergent theme. It is regulated in GDPR and the profiling construct. And it gets at what, Olivia, you just talked us through, and that is this incredible complexity that, yes, we can talk about it in our privacy policies. We can be transparent, but it's very, very challenging. And one of the questions that came in on our chat is, in this increasingly complex world where it is AI everything, how do we as brands ring the bell of creating sufficient transparency for people in this just unbelievable accelerating complexity of how a digital ecosystem works, not just collected data or observed data, but created, inferred, derived data and activations and syndications against those insights. If I could, Knut, your thoughts, and then I'll turn to Sachiko and Olivia.
That's an incredibly broad and multifaceted question. I think to refer back to the keynote, right? When I listened to Francesco, he was talking about transparency, explainability, accountability. So that's absolutely key. The understanding of the data sets that you are using, and ensuring the absence of bias, the way you construct your algorithm and your ability to explain what they do thinking about that, thinking about human interfaces in particular, and those AI, maybe not in the marketing context, but AI that then has an impact really on people. So ensuring human control, thinking about coding fairness, privacy into your algorithms and being transparent about that.
Thank you.
I don't know whether it answers the question, because the question was very.
I'm going to turn to Sachiko quickly. 5 seconds, Sachiko. Thoughts, and then hurry, and we might have time for Olivia.
Short explanation videos. Olivia.
Oh, wow. Okay, that was quick. Think about your purpose, think about the consequences, and always have human accountability.
All right. Well, I think we are at time. William?
Sheila, thank you so much. What a fascinating discussion. A really, really complex area, but some amazing contributions there from all of the speakers.